Ruler School is brought to you by Happy Little Hug Factory and these amazing patrons. Thank you for your support. Enjoy the video.
Hey guys, what's going on? It's Paul, and today I'm bringing you the tournament report today for GP Berlin in Vegas. And down in the description below, you're going to find all the deck lists for these GPs, as well as deck lists for the Games and Geek 1K that we actually didn't cover. I was in the Holy Land and I was trying to get back, but I was sick and feeling awful, so I just didn't do that one. But we wanted to make sure that you had the deck lists, so definitely check those out. And without further ado, we're going to get right into these tournaments, and these are a lot of fun to look at, and we're going to be looking at the top deck lists in a little bit of a different way. We're not going to just toss a bunch of lists at you. We're actually going to talk about the decks that showed up, and top deck lists will be available on the screen, but they're also going to be down below in the description if you need to look at them in more detail, because it's worth looking at. Alright everyone, if you're looking at these deck lists and you're noticing some different decks cropping up since the ban list, we're going to explain why. And one of those decks was Gil. So Gil Control is one of those decks that fell off because Time Spinning Witch had things that it was able to do. And because of that, Gil was kind of pushed out of the meta. Yet what we're seeing here is Carlo Drebenstedt actually won GP Berlin with his Gil list, and this is a pretty standard Gil list from the time that Rhea Cluster was ending. We're moving into NV1/Rhea Block New Frontiers format, and this is a pretty standard build, although he's playing a ton of Wind Magic Stones and he's not playing any Blue Magic Stones like Vegan here. It's definitely something that we can look at and notice that he's playing Gil Lapis over Karura, which is one of the main differences of the list. They're pretty much the same card, although the Gil Lapis has the ability to remove elementals in your graveyard and give him +1/+1 counters, which is kind of relevant if you're trying to increase your damage over time, or if you're trying to get around your opponent's Karuras or others really strong resonators. It's a good way of including another resonator that can't be canceled into the deck, although one over the other, that's really up to player preference. Gil has complete barrier, whereas Karura only has barrier chant, and with some additions to the format in the form of Mistletoe and some other resonators that can just be blown up as a result of those effects, Gil Lapis might be the way to go. Just depends on your playstyle. Vegan, on the other hand, using a blue stone in order to activate his spinning Aqua Souls and resurface things back into his hand so that he can play them once again, is another common Gil strategy. And if you're not familiar with that, we've covered Gil in the past on the tournament report, so make sure you go back into the past of the Ruler School channel. Make sure you look at those videos if you're a little confused on how Gil might run. He's kind of difficult to pilot from some people who have played him and had the experience of playing Gil at a large tournament. So why is Gil cropping up now? Well, I mentioned first of all that there is no Time Spinning Witch in the meta. And why is that important? Well, Time Spinning Witch was a very powerful ruler for the first few months that we had new Valhalla in the format, and that's mostly because Distortion of Time was one of those really powerful cards against control lists. It could just freeze stones, and because it could freeze stones, it could out-tempo most control decks and just take over the value game. Now, because Distortion of Time is gone, Gil has the ability to be a very strong, very resilient control deck in the format as we see him right now. Now, Gil has tools, the same old tools. He has Lorite to activate against things that are using activate abilities or that are using automatic abilities, and because he uses spirit magics, Lorite can just come back into his hand whenever he wants. It's pretty nice, and it's probably the best deck to be using Lorite, considering he can just use it over and over. And then of course Gil has access to some high tier barrier resonators in the form of Karura, and of course of Gil Lapis. We talked about those a little bit just a while ago, but they're beaters and they're good finishers for control lists like this. Then of course he still has access to Farrer's Spell and the other cancel spells that are in green, and because he's Gil, he himself is a very strong beater himself, with barrier and the ability to search out any of the different chants that he has in his deck. So Gil is a classic Rhea Cluster ruler. We saw him come out, we saw him get reprinted with his sealed effect, printed on him in the 80K set that came out right after the start of that cluster, and he's been around pretty much ever since then, but it's great to see him back. He's a fun ruler if you haven't played him. He's one of those really interesting control rulers that if you want to use your J ruler, he's definitely one of those really good play styles that you're going to enjoy. Yet, by far the most popular green ruler that we saw at both tournaments, really, was Hanzo. Now, Hanzo is one of those rulers that I did not think would be very good at this point. However, the Sealing Scroll that he has access to is one of the most powerful runes that we have because it cancels other runes. So if your win condition is a rune and you're playing against Hanzo, it definitely might get canceled. And if you flip Hanzo and flip this Sealing Scroll back down, you can do it again if you want. So Hanzo is turning into one of the better rulers over Chimimi, and we'll discuss that in a little bit as to why. And one of those reasons is the Yokai Festival. Now the Yokai Festival is very good because we got a card called Jizo Statues, and this card might look a little weird, but once it gets rolling, it's going to be this really hard train to stop. And Yokai Festival lets you just play this with very little in your way. You can just pop out a couple 6/6s that get bigger over time relatively early in the game, and that sort of tempo building is very good for keeping pressure. Other resonators that Hanzo typically uses are quick-cast resonators like Kotaro and Viola to get the edge out on your opponent. If you flash them in on your opponent's turn and produce will, or you activate their effects, that helps to disrupt their plays. It's very similar to old-school Scheherazade. But in addition to that, they gain what players typically refer to as pseudo-swiftness, because they're being played on your opponent's turn, it goes to your turn, and they lose Summoning Sickness, so that's pretty nice. But one of the main things that puts Hanzo on top right now is Table Flip. Table Flip is what I would like to consider a pseudo-cancel. And the reason I say that is because it doesn't actually cancel a card, it actually cancels effects, or it cancels damage. And the reason this is so good is because even though it looks like a 4-cost, if your J ruler is Hanzo or Hanzo Chief the Koga, it becomes a 1 green. And that's very strong because you can just add it into your deck. It doesn't even need to be in your rune deck, which is really, really great. So this says if target resonator would deal damage this turn, prevent it, and then this card deals 800 damage to that resonator instead. Or if a target chant spell would deal damage to this turn, prevent it, and this card would deal 500. So that pretty much pushes all burn out of the meta. And then it really makes it difficult for aggressive decks that want to attack you over and over. Decks like Keurig, decks like Ayu, you know, things like that really just want to get in some damage. They're going to have a hard time because of Table Flip. So Table Flip is a really impactful card in the meta, and it's a 1-drop. So that's pretty intense. There was a typical Hanzo build that we saw at both GPs, and of course Table Flip for Isaac Rancic, who got 2nd place over in Berlin, was just like, Table Flip is one of the best cards on my deck, it's going first. And Table Flip really did move Hanzo into a new direction. He was already doing pretty decently next to Chimimi, and then Table Flip just put him over the edge. This deck in general is more of a mid-range with some Rachels and some Disciples of Lorite in the build itself, and then of course a full complement of Lorites, kind of pushing some decks out of the meta. We anticipated that Lorite would not be as necessary, however he is a very powerful card, so we might as well just play 4 of him, why not? And you can see some echoes of this deck style already being at work in this other deck from Delaney B at the GP down in Vegas. And this is the pretty standard version of Hanzo that you want to be looking at. However, there is another Hanzo deck that made mention and made some waves, so to speak, over in Berlin as well, and that is Hanzo Machines. And you're gonna say, well, hey, hang on, Paul. Hanzo Machines? I thought that was the Worlds format, and you know, you're not the only one who thought that. But Machines got some new support in the new Guinevere card, and that's pretty great considering it's a 1-drop just like Vivian. And then if you add in something like this Ayu card that we have back from Rhea, being able to steal your opponent's 1-drops like their Jizo statues, and then being a 6/6 flyer on top of that, suddenly you're amassing a pretty big board on top of all of the other support that you could use with Hanzo. Lars Brahms actually used Mosasaurus and Dinosaur Surfacing as part of his package. And then on top of that, he had table flip. So he had all of this different control that he could do. It was just a standard blue-green shell that he ran. And this is the full deck. If you want to check this out, it's going to be down in the description below. You can even see that he has some other mid-range elements here in Jupiter and a couple of the Misty Dragon Spirits. And then, of course, he's running Time Stones and the Dragon's Lord's Breath, which is something we put in our Shayla list earlier this week. If you want to check that out, it's on the channel as well. You'll see that Dragon's Lord's Breath is still a very powerful card in that feature match as well as in that deck profile, and it's no exception here. It's very, very strong. So there's different ways you can run Hanzo even at this point. He's one of the more flexible rulers, and that's kind of coming as a surprise, and I'm wondering if that's what the designers of the game were having in mind when they said that the ninjas were jacks of all trades but masters of none. They're able to just flow into any deck they really want, and it seems like that's kind of what's going on here. Yet, one of the most surprising things that we got out of the Las Vegas GP was pandas, and 2 pandas, so like out of that. So we had Cole, who actually won the tournament with pandas, and he was playing against Joey, who was also playing pandas. So what's so great about this is a meme in the United States because we did not think pandas ever had it in them. But I just want to remind everybody that if we were looking back at old tournament reports, looking at how I was looking at Rhea block only and saying, hey, you know, pandas might be a deck in the future, who knows, because they're doing so well as this kind of aggro style, this aggro mid-range kind of style of deck, and lo and behold, we have 2 pandas that finally top and actually take the GP in Vegas, and this awesome panda finds this awesome jewel in, you know, the place where everyone goes to get their cash. Kind of seems appropriate in my opinion. What's interesting about these lists is that they're not running Messenger of the Sun. This is one of the major cards that came out of Strangers of New Valhalla. This is one of the things that people were hyping because it works so well with Brunhild, but Tigris didn't even need it. In fact, he didn't need a lot of the new stuff. He just had to use some of his old support, things like Gem Mallet Panda, which is essentially, you know, Acolyte of the Sun, but for pandas. They also had to use Orphica in combination with some of the other things that they could be using, like Air, Valkyrie of Mercy. We actually saw this a little bit at our recent ARG States here in Michigan. There is a loop that you can use with Air and Orphica to sort of recycle Orphica over and over and over again, bringing Air back in, bringing something back from the graveyard, and then of course if Orphica leaves or dies, you get a panda, which is really cool. So there's this nice little niche that these cards fall into, especially in this list. And then one of the main win conditions of the deck is Rose Quartz coming in and just recovering all of your little dudes like these guys, and then you're able to swing in with them again. So it's the bread and butter strategy for Tigris, but with the removal of Time Spinning Witch from the meta, it seems like there's a little bit more room for pandas to actually do what they do best. Yet, there were a lot of players who were actually piloting the other white choice in this format, and that was Brunhild. And Brunhild got a huge bump because of Acolyte of the Sun, Messenger of the Sun. They're all from the Sun, so I'm just gonna say this. Messenger of the Sun is one of those cards that really gave rune decks in white some advantages, because whenever you play a rune, you draw a card. And it says when you play a rune, not from the rune deck, not a master rune, a rune, which means you can cast one from your hand and you have a draw engine all of a sudden. If your opponent wants to set up an addition, it's just gonna destroy it. So Messenger of the Sun has probably the best reputation, one of the best cards to come out of this set, alongside Blade of Faith. Now, just like Table Flip really moved Hanzo into a really strong position as a ruler in general, Blade of Faith did that for Brunhild. So she's got everything that she needs right at this point to sort of move into the meta as one of the top tier decks. And the reason is because this just removes the target resonator from the game. It means if you're playing against Brunhild, they can't revive whatever you get rid of. It means that if you're playing against Jeanne d'Arc in any blacklist, Jeanne d'Arc doesn't live anymore. This card is just very strong, and of course you can't cancel it with Fairy Spell because it doesn't have Quick Cast. So this card is amazing, and one of the underrated cards that I think people are overlooking just a little bit is the March Hare of Valhalla, who gets Drain and +3/+3 for a 2-drop. So it becomes a 2-drop 9/9 with Drain as you continue to play your runes. So you're drawing cards with Messenger of the Sun, you're getting rid of their cards with Blade of Faith, drawing a card because it's a rune, and then because you're revealing runes in your rune deck, you're powering up your March Hares and getting additional life back, which is really, really cool. And then the big daddy, or I guess the best knight of the whole set, is Mistletoe. And not every Brunhild list needs to run Mistletoe. However, when you play it, a bunch of different things happen. It's one of the really strong boss monsters of the deck, and of course, it just goes really well with Brunhild because Brunhild wants to bring everything back from the graveyard, including Messengers of the Sun, March Hares, other cards that you can run. There's tons of different options in white. The field for white has been getting wide for a very long time, with cards like Imel being one of the rulers that we got out of Rhea Cluster, who really got some decent support with things like Mephistopheles and her 1-drop Angel, but we never had a lot of stuff to help utilize them the best. Mistletoe, Blade of Faith, Messenger of the Sun are those cards that are really starting to move white into a competitive tier, and that's really good to see and really refreshing. Other things you can run with Brunhild that, you know, might correlate with pandas as well are these cards, Angel of Hope, Air, and of course Orphica. That combination is really, really strong, in particular because they create a loop that can, you know, just bring back a whole bunch of stuff. And of course you're going to see tons of different Brunhild lists in the list down below, but these two in particular, especially Josh Patton, one of my friends and buddies in the game, actually did really well with his list. And you can see there's a ton of different things that we didn't even mention in here, including Adam Sykart, our Resonator from Rhea Block set 4. And then of course we have Ra from ADK coming in as well as a way of just sort of mitigating some of the spells getting thrown at you. Separation of Fates, Rod's Gold to give things barrier, as well as Aura of Hope, I believe is what that is. Being able to rest a J Resonator on opponent's side of the field. You can bring all of these different tools in to do some really crazy things, and alongside Hanzo, Brunhild with all of these different cards might actually be one of the more flexible rulers that we have in the format currently. And a lot of the sentiment is echoed over here with Benjamin Tanner from GP Berlin, with all of these different ways of removing or producing will or saving his own resonators. All of these cards exist in white, and that makes white one of the more flexible colors in the format currently. Of course, there was a time in Force of Will's history where black and red decks were some of the most powerful decks that we could possibly play, and I'm thinking specifically of Necrolance and Alice Cluster, with Necromancy of the Undead Lord being equipped to Lancelot, and us having dual stones that we could play Flame of the Outer World and all of these other things that we could play. However, times have changed, and one of the least represented decks is Lucifer. And although Philip Kybjors actually did a pretty decent job and got into the top 8 in Berlin, this is the only deck that actually made it for black. And of course, this deck in particular is looking very aggressive with the ability to flip Ray, as well as get rid of things with the different removal options in the deck itself. And of course, as we predicted, Nullstone is becoming one of the staples in most black decks because they're basically able to allow you to play this really powerful Majin Dark Elf option. Other than that, there's not much going on when it comes to Lucifer. He got some new toys, but for the most part, he's going to be doing the same basic thing. He's either going to be discarding your hand, or he's going to be trying to be more aggressive. But if you really want to be aggressive, you might just want to continue playing Keurig, because Keurig, tried and true, still a very strong red ruler. Probably the best red ruler, although the next best might be Isis, considering that she has the ability to give herself barrier and do some other things on her flip side. One of the main people who used this was Michael Mueller over in Berlin, and you can see some interesting and different cards being played here. The thing about Keurig that is so fascinating is he has all the support that doesn't get played very often. And we're going to talk about some of that specifically down later in the rest of the video, but you're going to be seeing some things like the doctor that gives you strength counters and stuff like that being played, considering you can just have a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more fun depending on your playstyle. And then Kyle over in Vegas also played a similar list, using some of the other options that Red has available to it, including the new Tiger and the new Taoist that we got with this recent NV1 set. But one of the main cards that we need to take a look at today is this one, Hero's Bracelet. And Hero's Bracelet is appearing in the sideboards of a lot of Keurig lists lately. And if you look at it, you can kind of understand why. If you're ever bestowing an addition, it's an addition that doesn't go away when it leaves a resonator, which is really great considering this thing gives +4/+4 swiftness, barrier, and precision. This thing is just kind of amazing, and it makes any of your resonators awesome. But you're going to say, how do you get something that costs 4 will from your side deck into your main deck? How do you not lose tempo by playing this thing? And that's where Howell's Martial Arts Tournament comes in. Now this card is pretty decent. It's a form of removal, but then as soon as you allow it to resolve and you get your Hero's Bracelet, all of a sudden, if you just have 3 open will, you have a resonator that can do some pretty amazing things. I'm thinking specifically of Flying Dragon of Mount Howell, who can pump himself even higher, so he'll be a natural 9/11 with flying, and if you want to remove a strength counter, 1 strength counter by the way, that's ridiculously cheap. You can pump him to astronomical heights with just 1 strength counter and the Hero's Bracelet. He can attack things specifically. People can't really get rid of him because he has barrier, and then of course he'll have swiftness too, and all for a 2-drop resonator. That's pretty good, especially if you end up cracking Keurig's Godsart and getting this thing off the flip, and then you can just swing in for game. That's insane. So the Hero's Bracelet actually puts in a lot of work, but this isn't the only resonator you can use it on. In fact, you can use it on Pyali Eli, the Flaming Fist. I can never say her name right. But she's also a really great option because she puts 2 strength counters on Keurig when she comes in, and then you can remove those to give her +4/+4 in addition to the +4/+4 swiftness and precision and all of these other things that the bracelet is going to give you. She's a really great candidate for this bracelet. And I also think of Howell Pig Squadron. So there's nothing more terrifying than a 12/12 with swiftness, precision, barrier Pig Squadron coming at your face, and if by some chance they end up killing it, well, you get 2 more resonators you can equip the Hero's Bracelet onto, and one of them gives you strength counters when it enters and allows you to fly and do all these other crazy things. So the Hero's Bracelet is a super fun and actually super relevant addition that we're seeing being played as part of recent Keurig decks, which I think, in my opinion, makes Keurig decks less streamlined and actually makes them more fun to play. And so it's interesting how removing Distortion of Time, removing Spirit Stone from the meta, and just moving Time Spinning Witch out of the top tier in general has really diversified the format and diversified the card pool enough that we can start doing these really interesting and very weird things with rulers. And one of the best things is Hero's Bracelet. It's probably one of my favorite things besides Pandas to come out of these recent GPs is this card's inclusion, because it's a fun looking card. We haven't really had some like really strong bestow edition type cards in the meta for some time now. So this is one of those really cool things. Now, of course, there's one thing that I haven't really been talking about, and that's mostly because Jeremy and I have been trying to figure out when to actually talk about it a little bit. I'm not going to go into the full thing here today, but what I will say is 182 people in Berlin. That's a lot of people. That's a ton of people. That's almost as big as Worlds, guys. And I know we're in kind of a state where some people are very nervous and anxious about the state of Force of Will as a company, but I just want to point out that we almost had a second Worlds in Berlin. That's huge. And look at all these different rulers that are being played. In fact, I even included Shayla in there because, you know, we've been talking about Shayla on the channel a little bit. And Shayla is one of those rulers that, who knows, you might actually see them top. Shayla topped once during the Rhea cluster only format back in, you know, the fall. It was actually pretty decent. Or I should say the summer. Excuse me, I got my seasons mixed up. They're all kind of weird right now, so I just kind of got messed up. But Shayla is a ruler that could see play. In fact, the deck that we piloted on the channel, who knows? But if we continue to sort of do these things where we say the game is dying and we don't look at the facts of how GP Berlin is really great and how people are flooding into the game and just really want to get going, you may never see some of these decks actually top anything because there won't be anything to top. In fact, another really good piece of evidence that we're looking at is the fact that there's a Grand Prix starting up in Italy, and it was announced February 11th, shortly before things that happened with Force of Will have happened. It's a Grand Prix, guys. It's a pro circuit in Italy. And they're actually gonna fire this thing. It's gonna be great. So I just wanna say, from where I'm at, you know, forget about Ruler School, forget about Jeremy Franklin, forget about the other people that we talk about or talk with on this channel. I'm just gonna say, I think the game is gonna be fine. You just gotta keep your head up. You gotta put on your hero's bracelet, and you gotta try and enjoy the time that we got right now. I do think the company is restructuring, and I'm gonna try and look forward to it from a positive point of view because I love this game. It's one of my favorite games to play. It's one of my favorite pastimes ever, and I just want to enjoy playing it, and I think you do too. So just look at these things, look how big GP Berlin was, look how awesome the Vegas stream was, and look at this new pro circuit that's coming. Things are gonna be alright, but we're all in transition, so it'll be alright eventually. Just keep your head up. With that being said, I just want to go into what I think are the tier listings for different decks. And of course, I think at the top, if you didn't catch it through the video, I was kind of hyping Hanzo and Brunhild, and I think those are for good reasons. Table Flip and Blade of Faith, Mistletoe, all of these really good cards that we got in this set really benefit these two rulers. And, you know, there might be some other rulers that might have some validity as well. I'm just kidding. I think Pandas are actually a pretty decent set of decks to actually be playing right now, as along with Gil and Lucifer to some degree. Although I think Lucifer, if it really hunkered down and got really good with its control and was able to do some work in the meta, it could be one of the top tier 1.5 decks potentially. Other decks that might have some validity are Ayu and Keurig for aggressive options, and then maybe some old school Machines. Machines got some decent support this set, and we even saw one top in the 1K at Games and Geek. So check it out. It might be a deck that might work for you. I personally am looking forward to playing Arthur potentially, so check it out. And of course, I'm gonna put Shayla on here, even though she's not on screen, because I think Shayla is the best. Other decks that I don't think have a real chance are these guys, unfortunately. Now, there are some other rulers that I didn't mention here that I didn't list. They're not necessarily, like, awful. Like, I don't think, like, Imel is bad. I just think that these rulers in particular have a tougher time finding focus, kind of like what Jeff said on the TCG Scrubs interview that he did. These decks just need some focus. They just need some stuff to go in their favor, to give them a little bit of a power boost. And hopefully we see that in new Valhalla 3 set that comes out later in the year. So who knows? Keep your eyes on these. Hopefully they get a little bit better. We know that Loki's rune is supposed to be, as Jeff said, disgusting. So who knows what that means? I don't know. But with that being said, guys, what surprised you the most about the recent GPs? I know that everyone's going to say Pandas, but I really love the idea that Keurig is running Hero Bracelet, and for me, the idea that the game is diversifying in ways and in healthy ways that I did not expect, with certain card choices or seeing cards that we haven't really seen that much. I think that's the thing that really just brought a lot of joy to me, looking at these lists, of course. So if you want those lists that I just mentioned, Again, they're down in the description down below. Hit like, hit subscribe, comment down below with what you think, especially if you want to answer this question. Let us know what you think down in the comment section down below. We want to have a good conversation with y'all. Hope you're enjoying the game. And of course, this has been Paul, signing off.